I'd like to introduce Steve Carrol. Steve is with Steve Carrol and Associates, and for many years has represented the St. Louis Public Schools in Jefferson City in regards to legislative matters before the House and the Senate of Missouri. And Mr. Carrol is here tonight to present the first draft of the legislative items that we will review, consider, watch for as this next legislative session approaches us. So, Mr. Carrol, if you'll give us that review, please.
Thank you very much.
I should say the highlights of
I'll try to keep
multi-page review.
this short. Appreciate the opportunity. This is my 10th year of putting together a legislative draft for your consideration for the school district. About a month ago, I gave you a larger draft, but this is more concise, more compact, discussing some items with you. I tried to focus on three areas that in discussions with many of you that you wanted to concentrate on. So legislative session pre-introductory of bills will be December 1. We'll start seeing some legislation be put in at that time. One of the main issues that you asked me to look at was student mobility. And some of the problems that we have naturally affects student achievement, children starting one school and ending up maybe 2 or 3 schools later by the end of the year. And looking at the numbers that were provided to me from the school district, possibly trying to keep that child in the same school throughout the school year, we're looking at roughly approximately 1,400 children that could be using transportation services. Roughly right now, DESE pays anywhere between 40 to 50% of the transportation costs for school districts, depending on the formula, depending on if we get penalized, which the St. Louis Public Schools does, as far as transportation costs. So I think the biggest component of this to having the student mobility program is going to be the cost, naturally, from DESE. What I have tried to come up with is a proposal known as the Students School Stability Program, where we would be asking DESE to pay for 40%, roughly, of what they're paid for now for these children in this mobility program. And I tried to draft it in such a way that we're just not pointing out the city of St. Louis, the public school system. And I think if we would be smart in drafting it, that any school district that has a higher than a 5% mobility rate could follow under this program. Roughly, I think we're about 11% by my calculations. Okay. But I mean, this would also possibly take in Kansas City and others and trying to maybe build a coalition statewide. So, I mean, currently the core transportation funding that DESE puts in, at least this year, was roughly $168 million. I'm talking with Jerry Oakland yesterday at DESE. They're going to be requesting $241 million for transportation. They won't get it. I had lunch today with the House Speaker, Rod Jetton. I'd say they'll be lucky to put an additional $10 million in the overall core of the transportation budget. So we'll be asking for additional resources on top of that. So if you're looking at that 40%, I think it'd roughly be about $1.3 million possibly, or $1.8 million coming from the, 1.3 from the state, 1.8 from the city if we did this. But a way to help us possibly pay for it locally, I've determined, is currently if we can get away from paying that 17-cent sales tax, fuel tax, for school buses. I think it would save this district tens of thousands of dollars. That was in that overall economic bill last year that was passed but was vetoed by the governor because some other provisions in it as well. But I think that might be an area that we could look at if we could get that passed to help any school district that participates in this mobility program where we wouldn't have to pay that cost. Proposal number 2 on the pilot for mandatory pre-K programs for all 4 years old in the state. I think after witnessing what I saw tonight, I think it'd be wonderful if we had mandatory preschool in the state for all 4-year-olds. What I've come up with is a program to establish the Prepare, Review, and Educate Kids program, pre-K. The problem with the pre-K programs, they're very, very expensive. And in looking at some of the studies and trying to come up with a fiscal analysis of it, doing a mandatory 4-year-old in the state would probably be somewhere roughly a minimum of $350 million a year. And this point in time, with the mentality of this legislature being very conservative, no new taxes, I think it's going to be very difficult, and I don't see that happening. So what I tried to do in putting together this rough draft is come up with several options that would make it more affordable, I think, and try to hit those children that maybe need it the most. So obviously, option one would be a mandatory throughout the state. And option two that I developed would be a mandatory pre-K for 4-year-olds for any school district that had a higher than 50% at-risk student population. This would take in several dozen school districts throughout the state, probably put a price tag on it, what I've calculated, roughly about $75 million, something much more affordable that the state, if they wanted to, could certainly afford. The third option would just be to develop a mandatory pre-program for all school districts that have lost full accreditation. This would take in several school districts throughout the state, a few in out-state, plus some urban school districts. Then the third was the tax increment financing and the tax abatement, where we should monitor all new legislation dealing with that might affect the tax base of this school district inadvertently. So there was a big bill that was already passed last year. Since this is an election year, I don't see a lot of tax abatements or TIFs passing at all. So I think, though, we should monitor it. As bills get introduced, I'll present them to the board so you can make a determination on whether we should oppose something, be neutral, or possibly support. The second section of the draft is just what I call additional issues of interest, basically the watch list. I think we know that we're going to be dealing with some areas in the foundation formula that are very critical to this district. I know of 4 issues that will be filed. I don't know if they'll be filed in December 1, but one will be the CPI growth factor in the new formula. Right now, it's currently every other year they factor that in. They should factor it every year to reflect the true inflationary cost of the school district if you want to do it right. Obviously, there's a price tag, but I believe that will be introduced in the House sometime this coming year. And this district should definitely support that proposal. Another would be the Prop C changes under the old formula. As you know, the money goes out per pupil evenly. Under the new formula that's being phased in, we get all the Prop C based upon a weighted ADA. So we get additional money for special education students, for our free reduced lunch students, for the ESL students. That went in effect 100% from the first year of the new formula taking place. It's not being phased in over 7. We get all that money up front. So there is an effort by some out-state school districts and some suburban school districts to do away with that. We need to make sure that that doesn't happen. We were able to beat that bill last year, and I'm sure it'll be back. Thirdly, the dollar value modifier. As you know, the cost of living increases are higher in the city versus some in outstate Missouri. Based upon, this was part of our legislative package several years ago. We got the new foundation formula, which is worth about $20 to $25 million a year to the school district. We need to make sure that that stays in. Again, we have some outstate school districts that like to do away with that. Also, we need to look at the weighted factors. Again, you've got some school districts that would like to see some of these weighted factors reduced. You have some school districts that like to see them increased. And so, obviously, we'll be looking for any legislation dealing with that. Again, we've got the tuition, scholarship, tax credits, the vouchers, whatever you want to call that. I'm sure that several bills will be introduced again this year. We need to monitor those after they're filed to see what this district wants to do, how adversely they may affect the St. Louis public schools. And obviously, the other big issue will be the charter schools. Last year, there were numerous bills introduced dealing with charter schools. One allowing the mayor the ability to sponsor in St. Louis and Kansas City. One that would allow any public school district in the state to come into St. Louis and sponsor a charter school. Kirksville, Joplin, Springfield, Hayti Heights. There was even one that would allow any university or college anywhere in the country to come in and sponsor charter schools. So I think we need to look at these bills as they come out, whether we support them, oppose them, or remain neutral on them. But I will certainly keep the district abreast as the session progresses. I'll just touch on one other issue. There are more, but to try to keep it brief, I'll be happy to answer any questions. But the local sales tax issue. Talking with Desi yesterday, Jerry Ogle did admit to me that, yes, we're really penalized in dealing with the charter school system on the amount of local money that's being transferred to them based upon the foundation form. As you know, we get our money and we use the second preceding school year. But now, since all charter schools are LEAs, that money doesn't transfer from us. DESE just sends it to the charter schools directly. And so while we put in the second preceding school year, we're actually counting the numbers of the charter schools 2 years ago. And yet today, though, we know there are more kids in charter schools than 2 years ago. But yet DESE is still withholding our money and taking that local money, based upon today's number in charter schools. And she admitted that that's just costing Kansas City and St. Louis, because the reason the second preceding school year was put in was to help all those school districts in the state who are losing student population, so they maintain a higher dollar coming in to take care of the overall cost of the district. And so we may want to look at this. I've drafted an amendment to take care of that, to where we could use the second preceding school year, but we also get to use the current charter school numbers. So I think that would help our dollar line there as well. And then plus, I think that the district and the board should look at our sales tax that we use in lieu of the property tax. Because when that took place, because of Senate Bill 781 in 1998, it was about, for the settlement agreement for the St. Louis Public Schools, for the kids within the St. Louis Public Schools. And the Master Settlement Agreement of 99 clearly states that that sales tax money is for the St. Louis Public Schools. But yet that money is also, that local money, is being transferred to the charter schools. And it could be in non-compliance with the Master Settlement Agreement. And so I think if we're looking at the budgetary standpoint, maybe that is something we can look at. I know that Kansas City right now is looking at challenging the local tax dollars that the voters voted in their district to support the Kansas City public schools, saying that money was voted by the public for the public schools, not the charter schools. And they're looking at challenging that as unconstitutional. So these are just some of the things that I wanted to bring to your attention. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
You mentioned Kansas City. Hasn't that lawsuit been filed in regards to the real estate taxes?
They lost on a TRO, and so they're looking at refiling this.
No legislative or no legal action has been filed yet. Steve, one other question in regards to the mobility issue. You identified a formula here that would essentially be a 40-60 cost share.
And that's basically based on currently what they're really doing now.
Is there any basis for requesting that full payment from the state? We've got a unique circumstance. And I just wonder, I know you're based on the sort of the district-wide formula, but I also guess wondering if there are more.
You would have to change state statute. Currently, we can receive up to 75% of state aid. I mean, you can receive that much from the state.
Up to 75%.
Up to 75%. But see, we are penalized. We penalized up to 30% for being a non-efficient school district. And that efficiency is a tough calculation, but it's based on 100 points or 100%, and they give you a 4% variation up to 104 before you're penalized. Our percentage is 352%. Kansas City's was very high too several years ago. They went and got a third party to come in and look how they could maybe save some money on the transportation, and they were able to go down on their efficiency ratio because of that. But we're the worst in the state, I think.
It's magnet schools.
Yeah. So I mean, but it's tough for any big school district. But I mean, that's just the problem we have. I mean, I would suggest, I mean, there is a chance we could ask for up to the 75% through the budget process without changing state statute. But I think to do that, we probably need to sit down. What I would suggest before legislative session starts, if this is going to be one of our main proposals to help the school district back on track, sit down with Charlie Shields, majority leader, and Maida Coleman, the minority leader, and sit down and see if we can get some help on this, because roughly of the total cost, 75%, that'd be $2.5 million. That may be doable.
Okay. Steve, I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.